finish up a podcast from yesterday called Serial. I'm sure you all have heard of it.
By the time the sun was up, Bo was in open desert with no cover.
And, that's what put me into line of sight of the Taliban.
And what happened? Some dudes drove up and just snagged you, or what?
Yeah, I was just walking along. There's a road, probably, I don't know, far off, 100 meters, maybe, in a line of motorcycles, probably about 5 motorcycles. There might have been a couple guys on the back of a couple of the motorcycles. There's probably at least 6 or 7 guys.
Yeah.
With the AK-47, one guy was a bigger one. They didn't shoot the 7.62 by 30, and shot the 7.62 by 41. He had one of those, and they were driving along the road, and I can't tell you what set them off. I can't tell you how they spotted me. I don't know. They deviated. They turned off the road, came towards me, and maybe they just saw somebody walking through the desert and they wanted to see who he was, or they were seeing if they needed help, or I don't know what it was, but there I was in the open desert, and I'm not about to outrun a bunch of motorcycles.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do anything. I've been, 6 or 7 guys with AK-47s, and they pulled up, and that was it.
But they said you fought like crazy.
No, I didn't. I'm not stupid enough to try and fight off. All I had was a knife. I'm not stupid enough to try and knife off a bunch of guys with AK-47s.
So did they basically just tie your hands and toss you on the back of one of the bikes or something, or what?
Pretty much.
Hello?
Hello, this is Sarah. That's me calling the Taliban. Hello, is that Mujahid Rahman?
Bale, salam alaikum, wa Mujahid Rahmani. Yes, thank you very much.
The Taliban's version of close capture? Next time on Serial.
Exciting.
Serial is produced by Julie Snyder, Dana Chivis, and me in partnership with Mark Bowl, Megan Ellison, Hugo Lindgren, Jessica Weisberg, Page One, and Annapurna Pictures. Ira Glass is our editorial advisor. Whitney Dangerfield is our digital editor. Research by Kevin Garnett. Fact check.
Support for Serial comes from Audible. I'm Dan Savage. At audible.com, you can listen to my book, Skipping Towards Gomorrah. Join me as I crisscross the country committing all of the 7 deadly sins. Start listening with a 30-day trial, and your first audiobook is free. Visit audible.com/serial.
Support for Serial comes from the Weinstein Company, presenting the new movie, The Hateful Eight, written and directed by Quentin Tarantino. The story of betrayal and deception stars Samuel L. Jackson, Kurt Russell, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Now playing in theaters everywhere.
Before we get on with episode 2, some news. A few days ago, the Army announced that it will take Bo Bergdahl's charges to court-martial, to trial, basically. He's charged with 2 crimes, desertion and something called misbehavior before the enemy. That second one, it's not used very often. It carries the possibility of a life sentence, which doesn't seem likely that would happen. That'd be so extreme. But it does mean Bo could face some amount of prison time if he's convicted. The Army's decision to go to court-martial, it's not that it's so surprising. I mean, this was always a strong possibility. It's just that for a lot of people watching Bo's case, it's been hard to handicap. All outward signs have pointed to an Army that is of 2 minds about how to deal with what Bo did. Whether to throw the book at him, or whether to say, okay, yes, he screwed up in a huge way, but 5 years with the Taliban, enough is enough. On the one hand, the Army leveled pretty severe charges against Bo. But then at a military hearing in September, the the two-star general in charge of investigating Bo's case, a man named Kenneth Dahl, who took a 371-page statement from Bo, who assembled a 22-person team, who coordinated with 24 government agencies, interviewed 56 people. He said he believed that Bo told him the truth about why he did what he did, that Bo was remorseful, that Bo recognizes, quote, that he was young and naive and inexperienced, unquote. When asked on the stand whether he thought Bo should go to jail, Major General Dahl said, quote, I think it would be inappropriate, unquote. Likewise, the officer in charge of that hearing, Lieutenant Colonel Mark Visker, in his report on what to do about the charges, he apparently recommended a lesser proceeding called a special court-martial, more like a misdemeanor trial. He also recommended no confinement. In response to which, Senator John McCain, arguably our country's most powerful former POW, he was held for 5 years during the Vietnam War, McCain told a Boston Globe reporter that if Bo got no punishment, he'd hold a congressional hearing to look into Bergdahl's case. And then this week, the announcement that the Army will pursue the charges in the most serious way possible, general court-martial. It's almost as if those military officials who've come into close contact with Bo are ready to forgive him, while the Army as an institution continues to be furious. A few months ago, filmmaker Mark Bowl was talking to Bo on the phone, and they were discussing the possibility of a plea deal, of whether Bo would take an offer for, say, 1, 2, 3 years in prison in exchange for pleading guilty. Bo said he didn't think he would, even though the basic facts of the case aren't in dispute. Bo admits he walked away from his post of his own volition. But Bo told Mark he worried that if he took some plea offer, he'd never get to explain himself, and people would continue to hate him, and it's true, a lot of people hate him, without ever fully understanding his reasons for doing what he did. That was his fear, that after all of this, he'd end up misunderstood.
You know, it's not that it was him. It was scary and looking through all of it. You know, I've been in the last 5 years and haven't seen stupid movies, whatever it is, that's been keeping me going. Yeah. Well, I can respect that. I mean, I think that to give that up now would almost be like, kind of almost make the whole thing pointless. Yeah, that basically turn it on to a really stupid joke.
From This American Life in WBEZ Chicago, it's Serial, one story told week by week. I'm Sarah Koenig.
Good evening, everyone. Ordinarily, the release of an American serviceman after 5 years of wartime captivity would be
Pentagon sources tell NBC that Bergdahl vanished under mysterious circumstances.
Bo Bergdahl, hero or dishonor? Ex-soldiers on vacation was the smear campaign by raising
Parents of some fallen soldiers say their sons would be alive if Bergdahl had not gone missing from his post.
In the old days, deserters
were shot.
The very last thing is just, I'm a prisoner. I want to go home. Bring me home, please. Bring me home.
I was talking on the phone recently to this Taliban fighter. I'm calling him Mujahid Rahman, not his real name. He told me that when they got Bo Bergdahl, that when they caught him, the Taliban knew they had scored. Rahman said, quote, a dead soldier is worth nothing, but he was captured alive, and he was like a golden chicken, unquote. In the weeks and years, really, following Bo's capture, during the tactical push and pull between the insurgents and the U.S. forces, each side would ask itself over and over, what is Bo worth to us? What is Bo worth to our enemy? How much will we get? How much will we sacrifice? Mujahid Rahman described one raid by U.S. forces not long after Bo disappeared. He said something like 15 Taliban were killed. An American Special Operations commander I spoke to described a similar raid, 15 enemy killed. I asked Rahman through an interpreter who was sitting next to me, was it worth it? 15 of your guys in one raid for Bergdahl.
Some people work more than 1,000 as an individual. He wants to work more than 5,000.
So exactly how did the Taliban get Bo in the first first place? And what did they do with him once they realized who he was? Mark Bowl looked into this too, and it was his company, Page One, that got in touch with a guy named Sami Yousafzai. Sami is Afghan. He's a reporter, a very brave reporter. He's based in Islamabad, but he travels around a lot for his work, covering the war in Afghanistan. He writes for Newsweek and other publications. And about a year and a half ago, Page One hired Sami to interview whomever he could and report back what he found. And he did. He didn't record these interviews on tape, but Sami found about a half dozen people who said they'd either been part of the kidnapping or had interacted with Bo while he was being held. One of the first people Sami found was this guy named Halal. Halal is a Taliban fighter, part of a group that was running missions in Pakistan province where Bo's battalion was based. What Halal told Sami is that the Taliban had gotten word from the local people in the area that sometimes a Westerner was coming close to the village, taking photos, and also that they'd seen a soldier sitting on top of a hill near a U.S. checkpoint. So Halal and a few of his guys had come to the village to see if it was true, and if it was, to work out a plan to grab him. Kidnapping foreigners, journalists, aid workers, missionaries, this was big business for the Taliban at the time, and it still is. I interviewed Sami about what Halal told him. According to Halal, they've just gotten to this village, to Mest, in fact, where Bo's unit was manning an outpost, and they're taking a rest at the mosque.
At that time, suddenly somebody shouted and said there is a foreigners in a Kuchi tent.
A foreigner in a Kuchi tent. Kuchi is a word for nomads. They keep flocks of animals that live in these big tents. In summer, they open up the sides of the tent for fresh air.
And he's asking about Kabul or asking about police. And Hilal said, for unexpected, I don't know what is this. And then we said, okay, let's go and find out.
So Halal and his guys go to this Kuchi tent. They drive up on their motorbikes and see this foreigner. Sami tells it from Halal's perspective.
And we told him that we are police. American normally working with local militia, which is not necessary to do uniform.
Right.
And we told him police, and he looked at us and then he jumped and I don't fight.
So is Halal saying that we said, oh, we're local police, so to come with us or whatever, and Bergdahl seemed to believe that and think he was maybe in safe hands?
Yeah, that's why the guy which he already that this guy didn't understand his language because he's asking about police and cop. That's what they understood. He was asking for something else. He was asking for a bus or something or road. And that's why he came and he said he was in white dress and sandals and he had something in his pocket. He said there was a pistol or knife or something, but
Okay. This Kuchi tent thing comes up in various ways. The Taliban say either Bo walked into a Kuchi tent or near a tent. The Americans got some intel at the time to the same effect, and that nomads tipped off the Taliban. For his part, Bo says he was never in a Kuchi tent. He says he was out in the open when armed men rode up on motorcycles and grabbed him. This is one of those discrepancies, and there will be others, where I feel like it's worth mentioning, because if Bo did walk into a Kuchi tent, as Halal is saying, well, then it makes his own explanation sound less solid. Maybe he wasn't really trying to cause a dust one by running from OP Mest to Fob Sharana. Maybe he was simply deserting. But I also can't tell how much weight I should really give this Kuchi tent story, because the Taliban bring up all kinds of rumors, like that Bo was in the village to meet up with a woman, or that he was looking for drugs. Rumors pretty much anyone who's ever met Bo can easily dismiss. And maybe the truth is somewhere in between. It's possible Bo was near a Kuchi camp and just didn't know it, and that the nomads saw him out in the open and alerted the Taliban, and Bo was never the wiser. Probably we're not going to get to the bottom of it, because we can't...
Oh, look at that Bentley. That is ridiculous.
And the details of what happened do shift around depending on who Sami's talking to, which isn't unusual in any kind of reporting. What I can say is that the overall chain of events, the major plot points that the Taliban describe, are pretty consistent person to person. In Sami's interviews with these guys, they don't seem that interested in pinning down exactly how Bo ended up in or near a Kuchi tent. More what they want to talk about is how incredible it was that it happened at all. To Rahman and Halal, to everyone involved, this Westerner, and not just any Westerner, but an American, an enemy of the Quran, of the Pashtun people, and not just any American, but a soldier. Rahman said the whole thing, the way they got him, and just being up close with your adversary like that, it was one of those lifetime strange experiences. We were blessed. In Sammy's interviews, they use this expression, they call Bo a ready-made loaf, a gift from God. They felt so lucky that Bo came to them, that of all the desert joints in all the provinces in all of Afghanistan, he walked into theirs.
Do not turn like that.
Halal told Sammy that Bo fought at first, but they subdued him. And then, once they got him on one of their bikes, they took him back to the mosque. At one point, Halal says Bo was again resisting, throwing punches, or maybe his captors were beating him up. It's not clear.
He said that, like Bargadal was kind of resisting, he started like not giving up, and he was a good punching us, and he was a boxer kind of guy. And suddenly one Pakistani Taliban, he came close to him, and he sit down on his knees, and suddenly, Bargadal kicked him with his feet, because his feet was open.
Mm-hmm.
And we were start joking with Irfan that let's even this guy know you are Pakistani. So, yeah.
I'm laughing here, as if I get the joke. I don't. In some of Sammy's conversations, the Taliban describe Bo as strong and aggressive. Other times he's meek and pathetic, the adjectives they apply to this mythic captive changing to suit the scene. Halal told Sammy that for them, for these Coochies who'd maybe never been up close with a Westerner before, or maybe not even with an infidel, a non-Muslim, Bo was exotic. Halal said he was like an animal captured by kids. His pale skin was weird, the way he spoke was weird, his eyes were blue, which Sammy says is somewhat suspicious in Afghanistan. There's a saying that you should keep away from blue-eyed people. In the mosque, Halal says people had gathered to discuss what to do with Bo. I have Sammy's notes from these interviews. In this one part, Halal talks about how Bo was sitting in a dark corner of the mosque, and another Taliban fighter said to him, quote, "See, you look like a small cat baby with shining blue eyes," unquote. I asked Sammy what that meant.
I think this is something explaining somebody's weaknesses. But I think he said he was very kind of weak. He was not like a big Americans, like a big heavy Americans. They thought he was like a weak Americans.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a note that you wrote that says Bergdahl was weak and I think brainless. Yeah, what does he mean by that?
Brainless, but the guy was stupid. That's why he ended in their hands.
Oh, like he was, like he was a dummy. Okay. Okay.
Otherwise, he would not. This was really something, somebody coming and jumping in your bike.
Was he scared? Like, did he say?
Well,
what his
didn't he say he was scared? Sometimes he was crying, sometimes he was smiling, and we thought, what's happened with this guy? But most of the time he was silent. Anybody give him water, he was not drinking. And he said he was like a Buddha. Buddha is like a, the famous
Buddha.
Afghanistan Bamiyan Buddha, statues. So
like
he
a
was
statue.
like silent,
Okay.
not really reacting to what was going on around him. We thought he's drunk.
Oh,
so
they did?
Apparently they draw him in the water somewhere, to release his drunkenness. We thought he was drunk, but he was not drunk.
Halal told Sammy that, to be fair, he'd never actually seen a drunk person, but apparently they tend to think all Westerners are drunk.
From that point forward, that was survival mode, and I knew I had to be extremely careful. If I was going to survive that, I knew I had to be extremely careful at what point in time I decided to push.
Yeah.
That's Bo talking to Mark on the phone. Of course, yes, Bo was scared. It was only rational to be scared. When the Taliban guys explained to Sammy how they kidnapped Bo, they kind of wax romantic sometimes or crack jokes. There's a swashbuckling quality to Sammy's notes from these interviews. But then you remember Bo himself. He's completely at their mercy. He's terrified, for excellent reason. He's in the hands of people who conduct public executions, mass beheadings, and often film them for propaganda.
doesn't matter how many kung fu movies you watch, doesn't matter how long you're a martial art fighter or whatever, you have to be realistic when you're facing those type of people. You know,
Yeah.
These people they have no hesitation, they have no problem killing you.
Yeah.
They will kill you just for the amusement of being able to shoot you. You know.
Bo says there was one guy in the convoy who spoke a little English, and he asked Bo questions. Was Bo a big commander? Was he an intelligence officer?
You said no.
Yeah, it was.
You said no, I'm not.
Yeah, I said no, I'm not.
Did you explain to them why you were out there?
Like the exact reason why I was out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that came out and more or less in a version that was more suitable for the situation.
What did you say?
I told him I basically was fed up with the commanders. They wanted to remember that they're kind of going through this is being filtered to the point that, I'm trying to get guys who barely speak English to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally.
So the basic line that you guys set up for American commanders because they were disrespectful, but that didn't work. Because they didn't understand what disrespectful was. So I came up with rude, and they didn't understand what rude was for some strange reason.
Bo says his memories from that time are sort of thin, in large part because he says he was blindfolded. He was focused on what was happening to him minute to minute, trying to comprehend his circumstances and how he could possibly reverse them.
They rode me around from a couple of
It's a blind turn here. I hate it. You never know what the signal is going to be. Green today. Yeah, hopefully no one's turning.
He pulled me off the motorcycle and slapped me down on the ground, and then one of the guys came up, I guess, I don't know, I'm guessing it was like a younger brother, or like younger buddy or something like that. And he had his cell phone out and he's like taking a video of me, and his buddy was like, sitting off to the side, and he's like, didn't say anything else. He's like, American? Yeah, I just shook my head, and then he slapped me. And did that a few times. All they wanted was the video. And then, after they were done, then they put the blindfold back on and they threw a blanket over my head. And then I don't know where they went, but then like little kids started throwing rocks at me. And so I kind of pretended to like flinch from one of the rocks hitting me in the head, which kind of allowed me to shift my weight. I was like trying to get my hands from behind my back and pull them around, so that I could get them in front of me.
That didn't work, so then Bo tried to lean forward so he could use his knee to move the cloth off of his face.
I kind of got it to the point where it was like half off my left thigh, almost. I still had a blanket on my head. And nobody was really stopping me, and I didn't hear any voices, so I was just like, this is the best it's probably going to get. So I just stood up and bolted.
Bo says he didn't get more than maybe 20 or 30 feet before he was tackled by what felt like the entire village. That was day one of his captivity. By 2009 in Afghanistan, the U.S. forces and the Taliban had been fighting for 7 years. And in all that time, there'd never been a situation like this. An American soldier captured. It was a new kind of crisis. But each side also knew who they were dealing with. They could anticipate what each other's moves would be. In those first few days, the U.S. knew that whoever had Bo would be moving him constantly, because the longer you stay in one place, the more likely you are to get caught. And they also knew that the Taliban's goal would be to get Bo to a hideout in the tribal region of western Pakistan, because Pakistan is like home base. Or to put it in Tom and Jerry terms, Pakistan is the hole in the baseboard where Tom cannot go. Pakistan is a sovereign nation, our purported ally. We are not at war with Pakistan. So once Bo's in Pakistan, we can't do much about it. In Afghanistan, U.S. forces can go anywhere they want, can do almost anything they want. But in Pakistan, it's much, much harder for the U.S. military to operate. Here's the other thing that happens once Bo gets to Pakistan. He becomes much more valuable. because his captors don't have to get rid of him in a hurry. They can take their sweet time making the deal they want to make. But of course, the Taliban knew that the US knew they'd head for Pakistan. So the Taliban did the opposite. Instead of heading straight east to the Pakistan border, the Taliban guy Sammy talked to said they first took Bo west to Ghazni province, or Mujahid Rahman. Sammy Yousafzai put us in contact with Rahman. He'd already interviewed him a year earlier for page 1. For this interview, Sammy had a car ring Rahman up, and they talked to me on a burner cell phone from inside the car, which is parked in a residential neighborhood known to be fairly safe. The call dropped about a half dozen times during our interview. Mujahid Rahman told me by the time Bergdahl came to him, the plan was already set. A Taliban commander named Qari Ismail Sulmanzai had taken charge of Bo and had arranged to deliver him to a group known as the Haqqani Network in Pakistan. In the meantime, Mujahid Rahman's orders were to keep Bo alive and out of sight for a couple of days and nights until the pressure on the border eased a little and they could sneak Bo across. By the time Rahman took charge of the motorcycle convoy, about 8 people, he said, it was obvious to the Taliban that U.S. forces were pouring into eastern Afghanistan to search for Bo. After Bo disappeared, was less gentle. It showed armed Western forces kicking in a door. A news report translated the text as, quote, if you do not free the American soldier, you will be targeted. The Army claimed the leaflet said hunted, not targeted, which actually sounds scarier to me. They also distributed chocolate. Sammy Yousafzai interviewed some of the people who lived in or near Meston Sharana at the time, and they remember the chocolate, wrapped in shiny paper. They also remember helicopters all over the place, and that the Americans were saying Bergdahl's name, or at least a word that had a B sound in it. The people Sammy talked to said they'd heard the missing soldier had been wandering around drunk when the Taliban grabbed him, just as Halal had suspected. That was a common rumor, that Bo was drunk, or that he'd gone to a holy site, or that he'd tried to fight off the Taliban with karate. In classified U.S. military communications released to the public by WikiLeaks, there's all this chatter on the ground that first week after Bo went missing. On July 1st, 2009, the day after Bo disappears, an LLVI traffic report. LLVI stands for Low Level Voice Intercept. It's technology we use to eavesdrop on enemy voice or data communications. Picks up this conversation. Is that true that they captured an American guy? Yes, they did. He is alive. There's nowhere he can go. LOL. I asked a former soldier who regularly read such messages what LOL means in this context, and he said the only meaning that seemed plausible to him was laugh out loud. Then, a few hours later, there's this intercept. We were attacking the post. He was sitting taking expletive and had no gun with him. He was taking expletive. He has not cleaned his shot. Since why would they put all that effort and money into looking for him if he wasn't important? Vermont said he'd heard foreign soldiers were sometimes trained in martial arts, so at first he and his men were very careful around their prisoner. But pretty soon, Vermont says his main impression of Bo was that he was just really scared.
He couldn't even eat, couldn't drink, sleep, and because he was thinking that what type of people we might be, and what are we going to do with him, are we going to kill him, are we going to behead him, or what are we going to do with him. So that was his situation. He was very scared and weak and confused.
Vermont said he didn't feel sorry for Bo. He didn't think of him as innocent. From his point of view, Bo was like all U.S. soldiers. He'd traveled halfway around the world voluntarily to invade their country and kill Muslims. But Vermont and most of the guys Sammy interviewed, they also talk about how Bo was their guest, how humane they were with him. Which is a little jarring to hear. I mean, tying your guest to the back of a motorcycle against his will doesn't sound like pretty close behavior. But Sammy explained to me they're not being ironic, that in Pashtun culture, a guest is always treated with generosity and respect. And so the fact that Bo was labeled a guest in this situation made it clear to the lower down guys under Kari Ismail's command that they're not allowed to kill him or even beat the crap out of him. Which Rahman said was a real concern, that some Al-Qaeda or Taliban fighters, especially if they'd had family members killed by Americans, might try to kill Bo or to kidnap him for themselves. One of the LLVI messages from July 1st, the day after Bo left, reads, "Unidentified male says, quote, cut the head off," unquote. Rahman himself had been a prisoner of the Americans. He said he was held at Bagram for about 2 years, and he said he made sure to treat Bo better than he'd been treated. Quote, "Someone who is in your custody," he said, "you treat him nicely," unquote. At one point, Rahman says they stopped the convoy in what he calls a wine field, like a grape orchard. They'd gone there to hide from U.S. helicopters. And Rahman said while they were there, they tried to help Bo out, to make him feel better.
Just to boost his morale and to cheer him up, we stopped at this winery and we did this little dance, traditional dance called a tan for him, so he can start eating.
And a tan is an Afghan dance where typically there's a drum and you move in a circle in unison. So yeah, apparently they did one for this frightened American soldier in a grape orchard. Did it work? Did it boost his morale and get him to eat?
No, څنګه دا فائدې وکړه او بیا څنګه بردال شروع وکړه خوراک خوراک باندې. No, it did not help. Did not help at all. And it had an adverse effect on him because he did not know why we were doing that.
A grape orchard?
That's Bo.
No.
Bo says he has no memory of this event, that he's never seen an Atan, except in a video the Taliban showed him much later. Kenneth Wolf was Command Sergeant Major of the 501st back when Bo disappeared, the battalion's highest-ranking non-commissioned officer. He said at first he thought they'd find Bo.
And I told the colonel, I said, you know what? I'm going to stick around here for a few days because if we find him, I want to be on the helicopter that picks him up. And he was like, why? And I go, they're going to whip his ass.
Meaning Bo's fellow soldiers are going to whip his ass. Wolf wasn't wrong to worry about that.
If we would have found him, I think